A homeless boy fixed a billionaire's car in broad daylight on a busy Manhattan curb, and the billionaire froze, not because the engine roared back to life, but because the necklace on his neck matched a secret she'd buried with her past. A homeless boy, a billionaire's car, a necklace on his neck. She saw it, and everything shifted. But why would a homeless boy carry the one emblem she swore no one outside her bloodline would ever wear? Why did the billionaire's car stop precisely where his cardboard shelter always stood, but never anywhere else on this route? And why did his hands move like he'd been trained in her own garages? But he smelled like rain and sleeping rough. He tightened a stripped bolt. The billionaire's car hummed, the necklace caught the sun and stabbed her eyes. But whose name pulsed inside that locket? And why did her heartbeat answer it? Rowan Pike listened to machines the way other people listen to gossip. The city talked in rattles and knocks, in the thin whine of a belt that wanted tightening. That afternoon, the sun was clean over the Hudson when a matte gray SUV coasted to a stubborn stop at his curb on 11th Avenue. New money usually didn't stall. This one did. Through the windshield, he saw a woman on a headset, composed and surgical. Her driver popped the hood. She stepped out before anyone told her to, navy suit catching the light like it had its own weather. She scanned the block, eyes landing not on his bedroll or milk crate but on his hands, which were already moving as if the car had called his name. 2 minutes, she said when he asked to look. If you make it worse, I'll deny we met. Rowan slipped the fascia free, traced a harness to the DC converter, found a loose ground strap heat-scored from impatience. He burnished the contact, tightened the strap until it stopped arguing. Try it. The cabin lit in a clean cascade. The motor hummed like a secret. The woman's breath left her like a door unlatched from inside. Name? She asked. Rowan Pike. Sloan Merrick, she said, founder of Merrick Mobility. He had just fixed a billionaire's car. She tipped her chin to the passenger door. Get in, I owe you a ride. If it sulks again, you're my tech. He hesitated. Warm air and stitched leather waited. Pride did too. He got in. Shop kid? She asked as traffic tightened. My mother's garage. Jersey side. We kept tired cars alive, we? She died last winter. The SUV slid south. Street noise softened. Under his hoodie, a small pendant tapped his sternum as the lane changed. Oval steel. A compass rose engraved a hair off-center, like whoever made it believe true. North belonged to people, not instruments. He kept it tucked. Sun found it anyway when he shifted. A quick blade of light. Sloane's foot feathered the brake. The off-center compass, flawed on purpose. Her father had sketched it the week before lawyers took their seats, laughing that north was where family stood. A jeweler made 3. 1 went with him. 1 stayed with her. 1 vanished. Where did you get that necklace? Her voice, which negotiated with ministers and mayors, came out too soft for the cabin. Rowan touched the pendant like an old map. My mother gave it to me. Said the first person who believed in her gave it to her. She wouldn't say his name. Sloane changed lanes without signaling, corrected, breathed. Your mother's name? Helena Pike, Lena. The name toggled a memory. A junior mechanic with oil under her nails telling Sloane's father that pedigree didn't persuade physics. Admiration had been easy. The fallout had not. You said you're between places, Sloane said. There's an apprenticeship we fund on 12th. Or come with me now and pretend to be my tech. Demos don't wait. I don't have a badge. You have direction, she said, eyes flicking to the compass. That counts, he laughed, surprised. Tagline? Not yet. They slid beneath the Merrick Mobility awning. Security waved them through. Inside, air cooled and smelled like new circuits. Rowan became aware of the grime on his cuffs, the way bright floors make you see yourself. He touched the pendant not to hide it, but to steady it, as if checking a coordinate he'd been following without knowing. In the glass lab, a wall displayed the city's charge network, dots pulsing like patient heartbeats. Engineers looked up, then down. The prototype SUV from the curb rolled onto a pad. On a high screen, numbers rose and steadied. If those slip, Sloane murmured, we lose $250 million in orders. Then they won't, Rowan said. She gave a small nod. Show me why, he pointed. Heat bloom on the converter bay looked uneven. The strap he'd fixed was the only one torqued right. A tech opened the bay. The second strap showed a crescent of soot where it had arced under load. There, he said. 2 minutes and a torque wrench. The fix was quick. On screen, the heat map evened like a fever breaking. Sloane exhaled. Up close he carried carefulness like armor and hunger like fuel. After the demo, she said, come upstairs, eat. Tell me about the person who gave you that necklace. Rowan hesitated. Hunger decided. Okay. The investors would arrive in 8 minutes. Her past had arrived in 2. Somewhere between those clocks, choice waited. Outside, the city kept its rhythm. Inside, a billionaire measured the distance between a boy's necklace and an old promise. The car purred. The compass gleamed. North, inconvenient and insistent, kept pointing through him. Rowan ate like someone who remembered rules. Small bites, elbows tucked, eyes checking whether he was allowed to want seconds. Sloane watched from the corner of her office while the demo floor below became a choreography of assurances. Battery telemetry on one wall, investor smiles on another. The city's grid murmuring through copper veins beneath them. The necklace lay against Rowan's collarbone like an instrument at rest. She tried not to look and failed. Tell me about her, she said, pouring him water from a carafe she never used. Helena, your mother. He set the glass down carefully on a coaster he hadn't been told to use. She could hear when a belt wanted slack by the way the hood vibrated. She said a good mechanic listens with their fingertips. Our place was small. People brought cars nobody else wanted to touch. She took them personally. Sloane's jaw flexed at the plural. Personal. That was how her father had treated machines and people, until a boundary failed like a cheap weld. Her memory of Helena wasn't crisp. Just a snapshot of a young woman with a braid, arguing that torque specs were written by engineers who didn't pay for their own mistakes. Sloane had liked her. The board had not. Her mother had called her father reckless with loyalty. How old are you? Sloane asked because the math mattered. 19. 19 fit too neatly. The compass pulled at her like a riptide. She felt the old argument flicker in her chest. The one she'd had with herself for years. That a symbol is proof of nothing. That coincidence happens. That the cleanest way to keep a life together is to pretend you don't hear the rivets loosening. Below, the prototype glided into position. On the mezzanine rail, her COO, Emmett Hargreaves, elegant in a charcoal suit, shot her a glance. Ready? She gave the smallest nod. They're about to start, she said. Want to watch what you saved? Rowan smiled, quick, private, the kind you give an engine when it answers you. They moved to the glass. On the floor, Emmett began the story he'd practiced in boardrooms from Shenzhen to Sacramento. Renewable logistics, municipal partnerships, a fleet architecture so modular. Even skeptics had to admit admiration. Cameras found Sloane, then Rowan at her shoulder. Somewhere a PR director whispered, "Who's the kid?" and started writing a caption. The SUV's drive motors spun up with the soft conviction of a well-designed future. The telemetry line stayed flat where it should be flat. No patch of heat misbehaved. The investor's body language shifted into relieved ownership. Orders that had been depending on our comfort became as discussed. Emmett's mouth-shaped numbers, $250 million. Scalable federal incentives, while Sloane counted breaths against the rhythm of the displays. On beat, on spec, on time. Looks like it held, Rowan said, and then, shyly proud, we held. You'd think she would be practiced at absorbing moments like this. Proof delivered, risk retired, capital courted. Instead, she heard her father again on a night long before Merrick Mobility had a name, when the old garage off Canal still smelled like hope and solder. He had sparred with young Sloane over a sketchbook, her rows of projected cash flows against his impatient arrows toward a hand-drawn future. You're not wrong, he'd said, tapping her spreadsheet, but you can't steer by figures alone. Sometimes north is a person. You're confusing direction with devotion, she'd replied. He'd grinned in that tired, dangerous way and flipped the page to his compass. Maybe you're confusing caution with control. He'd ordered 3 necklaces the week he knew he would leave the garage and its history. One for each of the people he thought could look at a broken thing and find its way back. 2 were accounted for. One had been a rumor. Ms. Merrick? Emmett's voice cut in through her intercom. Press wants a shot with the tech who saved our day. Good story. Of course, she said and closed the line. Rowan looked alarmed. This isn't my... It is, a little, she said. You made a call fast and right. You'll stand beside me. We'll say what happened without selling what's private. He touched the pendant, then let it be. What if my face makes trouble? Then the trouble was waiting already, she said, surprising herself with the tenderness in it. and we'll meet it with better tools. On the demo floor, lights shifted brighter. Emmett handled choreography with the competence of someone whose job was to make success look inevitable. Sloane stood where cameras wanted her, Rowan at her right. The photographer asked him to angle slightly. The necklace flashed. Sloane's lungs miscounted. She heard herself say the lines she owed: gratitude to the team, confidence in the product, partnership with the city, and added one sentence she hadn't rehearsed. Sometimes the best fix arrives from the margins. We build for those hands too. Applause, flashes, a few aggressive questions about margins and grid constraints, a deft pivot, more handshakes, and then the hour was over, and the room exhaled and they were back upstairs with the city braiding sound around them. "Why are you really helping me?" Rowan asked when silence felt safe enough to be true. Sloane considered telling him the truth in a single drop. "Because your necklace is a map of my past. Because your mother's name is a hinge. Because my father believed in people who made me bleed." She chose a slice of honesty that didn't fold the whole thing open. "Because you showed me what I hire for," she said. "Not degrees, calibration, care under pressure. Because someone gave you that compass and you followed it to my curb." He nodded like the answer matched the engine note he expected. "She used to say a car tells you what it needs if you stop telling it what you want." Smart woman. She was tired, he said. Tired of bosses who talked safety but squeezed minutes. Tired of men who said they'd lift her up and only climbed. We moved when the rent doubled. Then the landlord sold. Then the winter came. Sloane swallowed the instinct to fix the narrative with a check. Money was a tool, but not the only one. "There's a stipend with the apprenticeship. Housing for 6 months. You'd have to sign NDAs, pass a background check. I'll make the introduction personally." Rowan's eyes widened, then shuddered with a ritual she recognized. "Don't look too eager at the first door, it hates that. I can pass anything you throw." She believed him. She also knew Emmett. He would ask why she had pulled a kid off the street into their frame. He would count the risk in camera-ready units. He would be right in a language she spoke fluently. And yet the tug persisted. The off-center north of a boy who handled a live arc with patience and a necklace that didn't belong to chance. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emmett. "GQ wants a short. Also, who is he?" Press digging. Under that, a message from her mother who never texted during work. "Dinner tonight? Your father's date." Her throat went cold and hot. The date. The anniversary of the day he left the garage and everything there to start Merrick Mobility. Sloane rarely observed it. Her mother lit a candle and called it closure. Sloane called it welding darkness to daylight with ritual. She looked at Rowan. "Would you be comfortable meeting someone tonight?" Quietly, no cameras. "Someone who knew that pendant before either of us." "Who?" "The person who drew it," she said and watched the compass catch one last slice of sun. "Will you trust me to take you there?" He considered, weighing a lifetime of reasons not to trust against a day that had already rearranged the map. "If I say yes," he asked, "are you promising answers or more questions?" "Both," Sloane said. "That's how real directions work." "Then yes," she exhaled, then pressed the intercom. "Emmett, prep the apprenticeship paperwork. And route a car for a personal stop, no entourage." "For the kid?" Emmett's voice was too smooth. "We can move slower." "We won't," she said and killed the line. On the street, the city began its evening shift. Lanes filling, windows lighting like constellations you can only see when you stand back. The compass lay steady against Rowan's chest. North waited. So did a dinner table that had once seated a family and an argument in equal measure. The town car merged into the river of early evening, with the caution of a vessel joining a stronger current. Sloane sat forward, elbows on her knees, the way she did when the numbers on a dashboard told only half a story. Rowan watched the city pull its lights on like a jacket. The necklace rested at his sternum, cool as a coin on the tongue, steadying and dangerous at once. "You can still change your mind," Sloane said, not looking at him. "But if we turn back now, the questions don't turn back with us." "I've lived with questions my whole life," he said, "but I'm tired of them deciding where I sleep." Her mouth tilted. Not a smile, not quite. "Then you're already doing the hardest part." They crossed from glass and steel to brownstone, brick that remembered winters, stoops that remembered vows. The car stopped at a corner house with an ironwork fence shaped like ivy pretending to be iron. Sloane's mother kept a place like this because grief insisted on tall ceilings. The door opened before they rang. A housekeeper Sloane had known since she was small, Mariella. took their coats with a glance that missed nothing and offered judgment to no one. "Your mother is in the dining room," Mariella said. "She lit the candle." "Of course she did," Sloane murmured. They paused in the front room where Merrick family history hung in expensive frames, curated to look inevitable. There was the first charging kiosk, the ribbon cut by a mayor who later lost an election but bought 3 SUVs. There was Sloane at 26, sleeves rolled, hair stubborn, explaining an architecture no one believed would scale. There was her father before the early triumphs turned lonely, laughing, arm around a friend from the Canal Street days, grease on his collar like a signature. The friend's face was blurred by time. The frame was small on purpose. Rowan stood in front of a photo of the canal garage, neon script buzzing faintly even in stillness. "I know that sign," he said softly. "My mother could draw it from memory." Sloane felt the old hinge creak. "She ever say why?" "She said a man there once told her she had a better ear for engines than any engineer he'd hired. She said he was the first person who didn't make her feel like a trespasser in a room with power. But the room turned on him for it, and the room turned on her too." "My father wasn't afraid of rooms," Sloane said, "but he was careless with how they echoed." They moved toward the dining room, then Sloane stopped, hand on the jam, breath suddenly freighted with a decade of unsent messages. "Before we go in, my mother believes in clean lines. She also believes the past is a draft you revise with enough will. If she seems sharp, it's a tool, not a wound." "I know tools," Rowan said, "but I don't break easy." "Neither do I," Sloane said, and they entered. Evelyn Merrick stood as if the room stood because she asked it to. Black dress, single strand of pearls, gray hair cut in a style that refused apology. The candle burned at the center of the table beside a plate no one would touch. Sloane kissed her cheek. Evelyn's hand compressed her daughter's wrist in a code they both understood. Then Evelyn's gaze moved to Rowan, and the temperature shifted like a cloud over sun. "This is Rowan Pike," Sloane said. "He saved our demo." "Thank you for that," Evelyn said, and meant it, but her eyes were already on the small arc of metal at his collarbone. The off-center compass flashed, and her posture, trained by decades of hosting men who pretended they weren't afraid of her, tilted by a degree only her daughter noticed. "Where did you get that?" Evelyn asked. Not a question, an accusation that was trying to be a prayer. "My mother gave it to me," Rowan said. "Helena Pike." The name entered the room like an uninvited guest and sat down. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the back of her chair. For a moment the candle's flame looked tall enough to split. "We should eat," Evelyn said, because ceremony could still corral chaos. They sat. Plates arrived and left in a quiet choreography. The food was good, but it was scaffolding for what had to be said. "My father drew that compass," Sloane said into the clink of silver on porcelain. "I watched him. He said north was where family stood, but he kept moving the map." Evelyn's eyes flicked across the table. "You loved your father as a myth," she said to Sloane. "I loved him as a man with bad timing." Rowan set his fork down. "My mother said the man who gave her this paid in belief when his money was a fight. She said he walked her across a bridge in the rain and told her she had a way with broken things. But he didn't come back when the room got ugly. He left a note and a compass and a promise she decided not to spend in court." Evelyn inhaled through her nose. "Of course she wouldn't." "You knew her?" Rowan said, not a question now, a map aligning. "I knew of her," Evelyn said. "I knew the way your name was kept out of rooms that would have eaten it. I knew the way a man I married kept turning his face toward a door he'd closed with a story about necessity." Sloane fixed her mother's gaze. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I built something that needed clean edges to survive the first decade," Evelyn said, voice steady but not cold. "Because pity and lawsuits attract the same flies. Because your father was stubborn with love and I was stubborn with survival. And it turns out both make poor architects of the truth. I thought if I drew a straight enough line, the crooked part would fall off. But it didn't," Sloane said. And the softness in her made the sentence hit harder. "It found us anyway." Rowan leaned back, the chair borrowing his uncertainty and holding it. He saw his mother's hands in the light, cracked thumbs, tiny scars like constellations. He heard her say, "Engines will leave you if you boss them. You have to listen even when the noise isn't nice." He'd thought she meant work. Maybe she'd meant men. "My father," Sloane said carefully, "gave 3 compasses, one to me the night he taught me how to listen for battery noise through the floorboards of the garage. One he kept. One he gave to Helena Pike." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly as if signing a form she had held too long. He told me it was a debt of gratitude. And was it? Sloane asked. It was gratitude, Evelyn said. But gratitude can't tell time, and it doesn't know when a man's hand stays on a shoulder too long. I confronted him. He swore he would make it right by making everything bigger. He believed scale would sanctify his mistakes. He was wrong, but he built a company anyway. Rowan's voice was level, like a beam tested before it holds weight. I don't need a father, he said. I need the facts. I need the story that fits the noise. The facts, Evelyn said, are that your mother kept you safe from a war of reputation that would have used you as a weapon. The facts are that my daughter built a world that keeps wheels from lying on the highway. The facts are that men who mean well can still leave fires smoldering under the floor. Sloane reached for the candle snuffer, then stopped. I spent years smoothing our narrative, she said to Rowan. But the rough edge is where the grip is. If you want a test, I'll have legal draw papers for a DNA match, and we'll let science do what memory can't. If you don't, I will not push you into a story you didn't ask for. Rowan looked at the flame, then at the photos in the hallway, then at the woman who had offered him a ladder and the woman who had made ladders while people asked if she should. I'll take the test, he said. But I'm not waiting on a lab to start working. I have hands and you have engines, and somewhere a strap still arcs under load. Sloane's shoulders loosened by a fraction. There's a place in the morning where the grid lies about being calm, she said. Come at 6. Bring the necklace. Bring whatever north you trust. Evelyn rose, walked to Rowan's chair, and for the first time let her hand hover near the pendant without touching it. Helena loved a fight she could fix, she said, the name tasting like regret and respect. If you carry her map, carry her stubbornness too. Don't let rich people, any people, turn you into a prop. I won't, Rowan said. But I won't run either. They stood in the foyer where goodbyes take on the shape of contracts. Mariella pressed leftovers into Rowan's hands with a look that said what the rich sometimes forget how to say plainly. Eat. Outside, the night had hardened, but the air had that thin sweetness cities make when heat escapes brick. The car idled. The candle burned in an upper window, stubborn and small. Sloane glanced up, then at Rowan. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he echoed. And the compass lay quiet, but his blood did not. At 6, the lab felt like a church that believed in voltage. The city had not finished sleeping, but Merrick Mobility was already humming. Screens glowed with maps that lied less at dawn. Sloane waited on the mezzanine in a windbreaker, hair tied back like she'd been up all night drafting a plan and then threw it away for a better one. Rowan arrived in a borrowed fleece and work pants that fit like hope. The necklace rested where a seatbelt would cross. North? She asked. Here, he said. They went straight to Load Bay C where the grid simulator was honest to a fault. A test chassis idled on rollers while battery racks along one wall blinked their private language. On the glass, a thin red line kept trying to rise where it should have been patient. New supplier on the converter harness, Sloane said. Emmett wanted a cost shave after the state moved the goalposts on incentives. The spec matched. The field doesn't. Rowan stepped into the bay and listened. Not with his ears, not only. His palms on the chassis, his jaw loosening like a hinge before it sticks. He toggled the smallest load increase and watched the red line jump. Not like an engine failing, but like a story that had been edited by someone who didn't live with the consequences. The strap holds, he said, but the lug bite's wrong. File tolerance looks fine on paper, but the bite surface is milling too smooth. Under load, it's not grabbing the way it should. Micro slip becomes micro arc becomes heat. Looks like a rounding error. Feels like a lie. Fix? Sloane asked. Rough the bite. Spread the contact. Or change the lug to texture from the factory. He considered, then added, and add a second ground path on high-torque models until the supplier catches up. Emmett appeared at the rail like a verdict that wore cologne. Morning, he said, all affable consonants. Our street recruit finding anything a 6-figure consultant missed? Rowan didn't flinch. Yes, your consultant read the spec. He didn't listen to it. Emmett smiled without showing teeth. Charming. Sloane didn't turn. We're adding a redundant ground on high-torque configurations effective immediately. Draft the bulletin. He leaned in slightly. Before we place a flag on $1 million decision, we might wait for a lab report. We did, she said. It's standing in base C and it wears a compass I'm inclined to trust. Emmett's eyes flicked to the necklace, then to Sloane's face, then away. Legal's also waiting downstairs, he said. You asked for a chain of custody kit. Good, Sloane said. We'll do it now. The legal associate was brisk and kind in the way people are when they've trained to handle shock with procedure. Swabs, seals, signatures. Evelyn arrived midway through, wrapped in a coat that made her look like she could survive any winter. She signed as witness, her pen steady as a metronome. The kit went into a tamper bag with the same care companies give prototypes. How long? Rowan asked. Days, the associate said. No rush reports. Good, Rowan said. I can work without a word on paper telling me who I already am. He walked back to Bay C. Sloane followed. They roughed the bite surface with a textured washer pulled from a bin, laid a second strap in a clean arc, torqued both like a promise. On screen, the red line rose to where it meant to and stayed there, as if someone had finally asked it a question in its own language. Emmett watched the numbers flatten. We'll need a fleet recall on anything we've delivered with the new harness, he said. We can call it an enhancement or we can call it what it is and take the PR bruise. Call it what it is, Sloane said. We don't varnish physics. Draft the copy. We'll eat the cost. You'll eat the board, Emmett said mildly. I'll feed them the margin they paid for when they hired me, she said. He nodded once. A soldier accepting new orders and already calculating flanks. And the kid? Rowan answered for himself. Apprenticeship. Shop floor first. Credit where it's due. And one more thing. Sloane raised an eyebrow. I don't want a favor, he said. I want a name on something that keeps hands like my mother's from freezing while the room argues. A training fund, tools, stipends that don't vanish when a headline does. Sloane glanced at Evelyn, then back. The Helena Pike Fellowship, she said. We start it today. It'll outlive this news cycle and me. Evelyn's mouth softened, which was her version of tears. And if the test says what it might, she said to Rowan, it will outlive a man who drew compasses and forgot that maps are made for more than one traveler. The day accelerated. A recall bulletin drafted with humility, an internal fix spec pushed across systems with the kind of speed that comes from contrition. Shop leads briefed. Union reps consulted. A video recorded at the edge of the bay where the bite surface had just learned how to bite. Sloane on camera. Not reading. Saying the line she'd meant for nights like this, we made a choice that saved pennies and cost trust. We're correcting it without euphemism, and then, because she refused to turn Rowan into a prop, a cutaway to gloves on lugs, not his face, and a lower third that read, Mechanic. Apprentice. By 10, the press had found their angle and then a truer one. By noon, municipal partners had called, some to scold, most to thank. By 2, a supplier CEO had agreed gruffly to retool. By 3, the first Helena Pike Fellowship inquiry had landed in an inbox with a subject line that made Sloane sit down. Single mom. Night shifts. I can hear belts. In a quiet pocket between storms, Evelyn led Rowan to a small side room where the old Canal Street sign leaned against a wall, its broken neon mended and kept broken on purpose in one corner. A stool sat beneath it, paint worn smooth by insistence. She used to sit like this, Evelyn said, lowering herself onto the stool and then laughing at herself, not unkindly. No, she didn't. She never sat when there was work. I don't know what your husband was to her, Rowan said, honest like a wrench. But she said he told the truth about what she could do when no one else did. I think that truth is the only part of him I want. That's a good part to take, Evelyn said. And if the paper says what it says, you can take my number too, and use it like a tool, not a trophy. He nodded. I'm learning the difference. At dusk, the city remembered it was made of separate lives. Sloane stood on the roof with Rowan and watched a slice of river bronze under a sky that couldn't decide between drama and restraint. The recall trucks rolled out in a line that felt less like shame than like a parade for competence. Down on the street, a few employees peeled off toward the train, tired and unafraid. My father used to say the hardest thing about a compass is not the magnet, Sloane said. It's admitting when you've been walking south on principle. I don't need him to be a saint to know which way to go, Rowan said. I needed a door. Today you opened it. I opened it because you knocked in the right key, she said. Stay as long as the work is honest. Leave the second it isn't, he smiled. Deal. Her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. The lab, no, too soon. A reporter, maybe. She ignored it and let the moment claim its size. The wind tugged her jacket and his fleece in the same direction. The necklace caught the leftover light and threw it back in a line so straight even an old doubt could follow it. Whatever the test says, Sloane added, you're in because you're good. No paper can write that for you, and no paper can erase it. Rowan looked out at the river like a person checking a route he planned to trust. North is where the work is, he said. And where the people are, she replied, surprising herself by hearing her father's better angel in her own voice. They stood until the roof's rail felt warm under their arms. Below, Basie ticked his metal cooled right. Inside, a fellowship name found its first line on a brass plate. Somewhere across the river, a woman's grave had fresh flowers because Mariella did what bosses forget to schedule. Somewhere, a tamper bag moved through a system built for certainty and delay. The first star pricked through the haze and held. Rowan tapped the pendant once and then left it alone. He did not need it to tell him where to go. He needed it to remind him that maps are made by movement. "See you at 6, Sloane said. "See you at 6, he answered, and headed for the stairs with a gait that knew how to carry weight and keep its grace.